Elon Musk and Donald Trump go from the big, beautiful bill to the big, beautiful brawl.
You know, I knew they'd tangle eventually, but not like this.
Fan favorite Congressman Brandon Gill is back with a vengeance to deport illegals and take names.
You know, in all honesty, I think actually he just wants to deport the illegals.
I think he might be right. And Congressman Ogles will make a controversial case to anyone that punches an officer should face charges.
No one is above the law unless you're a Democrat.
Blaze News The Mandate starts right now. Good evening, Patriots. I'm Jill Savage, joined as always by Editor-in-Chief Matthew Peterson.
Yeah, it's good to be with you. It's a action-packed day and kind of sad, actually.
Yes, we have a lot of drama to unpack later in the show. But first, if you've been watching the show for a while, you probably remember this gem.
My biggest priority is going to be on the border. I think in some ways I could measure my personal success numerically, and it's based on the number of illegal aliens that get deported over the next 2 years in my first Congress. That's how I'm going to measure success. And
that's how we knew we were going to like him when he got to D.C. Please welcome back to the show, Congressman Brandon Gill. So we haven't had you on since Donald Trump took office. So we obviously have to start with immigration with you and what you think about what Trump is doing right now with the border and immigration so far.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I think President Trump is doing a phenomenal job. And the best part about it is that we're just getting started. We saw record deportation numbers just a few days ago come out. And all of that is just the beginning. Let me tell you, the major deportation operation is going to come once we get this big, beautiful bill passed, which funds all of this. We've got enough funding for 1 million deportations every single year. That's on top of funding for border security, completing the border wall, putting in river barriers across the southern border, increasing ISIS footprint by 10,000. I mean, these are major wins for Republicans that will provide for the border security that voters have been begging for so long. And the deportations that this past election cycle was about, that's when this is really going to kick in. But what we've seen so far is a president who is serious about upholding the law, who's serious about fulfilling the promises that he made to voters and about keeping the American people safe. I've been thrilled with this administration.
You know, I have to say that moment on the show that we showed earlier when you were asked about your metric of a success is probably one of my favorite answers that anyone in Congress has ever given me in my entire life. So it is a fan favorite here. But let's talk about the obstacle to all this, which is federal judges. This is a real problem. It's always a federal judge. The most recent thing is one's blocked the deportation of the Boulder firebombers family. And so a lot of Americans are thinking, how's this even possible? What's your take on this and what should be done about it?
It's another example of anti-democratic judicial tyranny. It's the lawfare that the left is waging against President Trump and his administration and his agenda, and by extension, the American people who elected President Trump to secure our border and deport violent illegal aliens, which is exactly what he's doing here. Earlier this year, there was a judge named Judge Boasberg from the D.C. court who demanded that President Trump turn around a plane full of Tren de Aragua terrorists. I filed articles of impeachment against him. I think we've got to stand up to these judges. We passed the No Rogue Rulings Act just a few weeks ago, which demands and stops district court judges from issuing nationwide injunctions, which is where so many of these orders are coming from. We've got to get a hold on this. This is not how Washington and our federal government is supposed to operate. We elect President Trump. He is the commander in chief. He is in charge of foreign policy. He is in charge of repelling an invasion, and he's trying to do his job, and judges are trying to stop him.
Well, if you've been on social media at all today, it feels like the parents are fighting, right? Elon and Donald Trump, they're going back and forth on X today. So the question is the coalition that we won with in 2024, are we already starting to see some fractures, or is this all going to be okay?
It's like a messy divorce here, and people say mean things in divorces. But listen, the MAGA movement is alive and well. It's been alive and well since 2015, whenever President Trump first got on those golden escalators and got into the political scene. President Trump is the leader of the Republican Party, the undisputed leader of our party, the leader of our movement. There's a dispute about this one big, beautiful bill. I'm a big proponent of this bill. I think that it allows us to execute on the promises that we made: border security, re-upping funding for our military after Joe Biden, repealing the Green New Deal, extending the Trump tax cuts, all things that we all can agree are very good. So I think we're going to get this bill passed. There's been some disagreements about the process, but we're going to do it. And our coalition, the Republican Party and the MAGA movement in particular, is going to be better for it.
So, yeah, in terms of the bill, I think it is important that people understand, what's in it. There's a lot of talk about, the fact that it doesn't make the kind of cuts that are ultimately going to be necessary at some point if we keep on running up a debt. And there's a lot of people on the right, traditional conservatives, who are upset about that. It appears, ironically, Elon is too, or at least that's what he's complaining about. But could you speak a little bit to how this funds the agenda of the president? Because I do believe that is what most people actually care about, and it's sort of getting lost in this debate.
Yeah, let me put it this way. Republicans have talked a lot about securing the border, and historically the problem with that is that to get a bill passed, we need 60 votes in the Senate, which means that we've got to negotiate with Democrats. And whenever we go to Democrats and we say we'd like to build the wall, or we'd like to pay for deportations, or fund other forms of border security, they come back to us and they say, we're not going to do anything unless there's amnesty attached to it. That is a no-go for us. What this bill allows us to do is to fulfill all those promises, get all the great things that we want and that voters have been begging for literally for decades now, without amnesty, without a path to citizenship, without anything that Democrats want. That's a huge win for us. 1 million deportations a year. That's a huge win. Border wall, river barriers, ICE, funding for Border Patrol, funding for our Coast Guard to keep people from coming in from our seas. I mean, these are all things that we all support, and we can do it without having to make any concessions to Democrats. And the only way we can do that is in this one big, beautiful bill. I mean, this is a crucial piece of legislation for border security.
I feel like anytime we get another big, huge win for the American people, it comes in the form of a Brandon Gill clip when you're putting Democrats' feet to the fire. I know that we have this one yesterday. This one is about white supremacists. Let's go ahead and watch.
I'm asking you if you're a covert white supremacist, which, according to one of your own organizations, again, denial of racism constitutes covert white supremacy. Would you like to answer the question?
I don't know what the question is.
So you refuse to answer whether you are a covert white supremacist.
I am here to talk about the essential work that nonprofits do. If you'd like to ask me a
I am
question
utterly
about
dumbfounded.
nonprofits
You are on
in your
record right now,
district
and you will
or
not say
throughout
that
the
you are not a
country.
covert white supremacist?
Now, I will tell you, we have changed the entire format of our show, The Mandate. On Fridays, we play the best soundbite of the week. And that's because we had so many of your sound bites that we want to play, because I love the fact that you get up there and you ask such obvious questions. And yet these Democrats, they can't answer the very simple, straightforward questions. So why do you think that is, that every time you get up there and you just try and say, hey, I'm just asking A and B questions, very simply, why can't they answer them?
That one in particular was bizarre. This woman was the head of a nonprofit organization, an organization that represents various nonprofits. And one of them had been promoting this idea that if you deny that you're racist, that's evidence that you're a covert white supremacist. So all I was doing was holding her to the same standards that her nonprofit affiliates hold the rest of America to. And I asked her a very straightforward question. I asked them, are you racist? She said no. And I said, well, that seems to me by your own standards that you must be a covert white supremacist. Are you? And for some reason, she couldn't answer. I asked her the same question multiple times. I gave her 2 or 3 minutes in our hearing to clear her name, and she refused to. This is a very straightforward question. I was frankly dumbfounded during the hearing. But one of the things I think is so good is the opportunity we have now to read the left's words right back at them. There was a time period during the BLM movement, the George Floyd riots, all of that, whenever anti-racism was in vogue. And leftists said all kinds of bizarre, utterly hateful things to Republicans. And all those chickens are now coming home to roost whenever we can hold them to the same standards that they held us to. And that's what I'm trying to do in that hearing and what we've tried to do in the past.
Yeah, it is wonderful to see, because these people have been, pushing this out to everyone, particularly younger people, but really the entire country for the last few years. And it's interesting. They don't really want to, sit there under the lights and have to deal with what they dish out on a daily basis throughout this entire country. And so hopefully we get rid of all that however you can. I want to move to President Trump's travel ban. He recently issued a travel ban in 12 countries, and he laid out his rationale the other day in a White House ex post.
We will not let what happened in Europe happen to America. That's why on my first day back in office, I directed the Secretary of State to perform a security review of high-risk regions and make recommendations for where restrictions should be imposed.
So talk to our audience a little bit about this travel ban and its rationale, and what you think about it. And does it go far enough? Would you add more countries to it? What's the reasoning for it?
Well, I think that for me, and I think for many Americans, this is exactly what I voted for. Mm-hmm. We saw what happened in Colorado just a few days ago, whenever a initially a legal immigrant who came in overstayed his visa, making him an illegal alien, went and attacked American Jews on American soil. This is somebody who shouldn't have been let into the country to begin with, who should have been deported after he overstayed his visa. Of course, Biden rewarded him with a work permit before he then overstayed that work permit. But this is a president who's recognizing that not all countries are the same, not all cultures are the same, and we don't want to import foreign dysfunction into our United States. We don't want to import foreign terrorists into the United States. Right now, we're at a point where we have let in millions upon millions of people under the Biden administration without any vetting. And we've got to get control of our own immigration policies, our own domestic security before we allow more people in. I think that is basic common sense. It keeps our people safe. It keeps the American people safe. And I think this is a great policy.
Congressman Brandon Gill, keep the good sound bites coming. We love them here on the show. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with Representative Andy Ogles right after this. Well, family farms aren't getting shut down because they've stopped hard working. No, we know that they work so hard, but they're actually getting shut down because the meat in the grocery store, it's not coming from them anymore. It's coming from overseas. They have the sketchier standards, the sketchy labels. People don't even know what they're getting. Over 85% of the so-called grass-fed beef in the United States is imported. That's why you need to get your meat from goodranchers.com, because it's 100% American, born, raised, and harvested right here from family ranches who've been doing it the right way for generations. And it's not just about patriotism. It also tastes incredible. Now, Father's Day is around the corner, so I can tell you about their King Cut box. It's loaded with a thick cut ribeyes, strips, and fillets, and your dad will open it and say, now that is a gift. If you subscribe today, you can get your pick of free meat for life, and you can choose from Wagyu burgers, hot dogs, bacon, or chicken wings in every box with your lifetime of your subscription. Plus, you can get $40 off at checkout with my code Jill. So go to goodranchers.com right now, support American farms, eat better meat, and don't forget, use the promo code Jill to get $40 off and free meat for life. It's Good Ranchers, American meat delivered. Apparently, punching a cop is now part of congressional oversight. Well, that's what some Democrats are claiming after things got physical at an ICE facility. Representative Andy Ogles wrote about this for theblaze.com, and he's here to break it down and to tell us what needs to happen next. So, Representative, thank you so much for being here tonight from the great state of Tennessee. We love Tennessee. But the headline of your column is "Punch a Cop, Get a Charge." even if you're in Congress. Now, that seems pretty basic, but common sense isn't always practiced there in Washington, D.C.
No, it isn't. And so, I'm on the Financial Services, but also the Homeland Security Committee. And so Secretary Noem was before the committee, and I asked her the very question. Obviously, as Congress members of Homeland Security, we have an oversight responsibility when it comes to Homeland and ICE. I said, does that give us the right to break into a detention facility? Obviously, the answer is no. Does that give us the right to assault a member of law enforcement? Obviously, the answer is no. And so, look, whether you're, Joe the plumber, stay-at-home mom, member of Congress, the rules apply. You can't punch a cop. State, federal, local. I mean, this is common sense, folks. And let's be honest. I mean, these are the folks that keep us safe day in and day out. And for woke radical mayors to frame ICE as bad guys, or the mayor of Boston just said that compared ICE to neo-Nazis, that type of dangerous rhetoric is why we're seeing a 413% increase on attacks against our federal law enforcement. Enough is enough. It's time to hold this member of Congress accountable for punching a police officer, but you can't do.
Now, my understanding is that we have the official Democrat leader of the House and AOC, threatening the other way, federal agents and President Trump if they hold McIver accountable.
Well, I mean, what I can say is that since those kind of pronouncements were made, 2 federal charges have been levied against the member, and obviously nothing's happened. But that being said, this again adds to that dangerous rhetoric of, you can't assault a member of law enforcement. And look, you can agree or disagree with President Trump. You can agree or disagree with Congress, but that doesn't mean that you can go out and, conduct violence. And that applies to members of Congress. If I'm in a bar and I get into a fight, guess what? I was a guy that was in a bar and got into a fight. If you're a member of Congress, you're in front of a nice detention center and you get into a fight, guess what? You got into a fight, and those same laws apply. So and again, we've got to stand up. I was at a press conference the other day with ICE, and I said, look, not only do I stand with ICE, myself, we the people, we stand in front of ICE, meaning that we support them so much that no longer are we going to tolerate these attacks against our members of law enforcement. You're going to have to come through us first, because again, we've got to get back to this idea of rule of law and order. And we have 10 million people or more that came here illegally. It's not my fault. It's not your fault that the Democrats promised them some sort of amnesty. They told them it was okay by way of leaving our border unsecure. Guess what? The president of the United States, Donald Trump, has secured this border. In the big, beautiful bill, whether you like it or not, it has more money for securing the border, has more money for deportations. The goal is 3,000 a day, detain and deport. I would say that we need to be doing 10,000 a day. You came here illegally, I'm sorry, but you need to go back home. You need to go get in line. You have to come here the right way.
Yeah, let's shift this conversation into Nashville specifically, because last week you rightfully called out Nashville Mayor Freddie O'Connell. He said the obstructionist that is happy to have the sanctuary jurisdiction to stop local and federal law enforcement to aid and abet illegals. So what's the latest on that situation now?
Just so your viewers understand, so you had an ICE operation that took place in Nashville, and the mayor of Nashville has instructed law enforcement, fire department, public works to basically snitch on ICE to report any of their activities so that the mayor can then put that information online so people can invade law enforcement. Furthermore, the mayor's office doxed the federal agents and put their names online. Now, what you have to understand that these cartels, they're not just gangs. We sometimes think of them as street gangs. These are very large, very sophisticated, albeit corporations. Their distribution and their reach into the United States of America would rival FedEx. And so if they have a name, if they have a photograph of an ICE agent, they can figure out who that person is. They can figure out where their family lives, and it's putting members of law enforcement at risk. And so this type of behavior is unacceptable. Furthermore, there's a community oversight board for the Metro Police Department, and the mayor of Nashville was encouraging citizens to file complaints against his own police. Again, unacceptable. This type of rhetoric is dangerous. You had the mayor of Boston who literally just compared again the ICE agents to neo-Nazis. That's totally unacceptable. And again, we see an increase on attacks against our law enforcement because of these woke, radical activist mayors who are literally siding with murderers and rapists drug smugglers and child traffickers versus their own citizens.
Congressman, you had a take on X that I thought was great. I think I liked it about how Musk's tweets before today helped reset the conversation on the big beautiful bill. But as I'm sure you know, things have escalated a lot since then. So we have to get a pulse check from you on that and what's unfolding there. What unfolded today?
Well, as a member of Congress, obviously I'm focused on the big beautiful bill, not the big beautiful brawl. But that being said, look, that's between those two individuals, those two men. But what I will say when it comes to Elon criticizing the House version of the bill, it does create a reset where the Senate has the opportunity to make the bill better, to have some additional cuts. Their self-imposed deadline is before July 4th. They'll kick it back to the House, hopefully with more cuts, making it more beautiful, and then we'll vote on it there at mid-July. And again, that was the President Trump's priorities. He wanted to make his tax cuts permanent. He wanted no tax on tips. He wanted no tax on overtime. He wanted to secure the border, and he wanted more deportations. And that's what the bill delivers. Now, I would say the bill's not perfect. There's much more that needs to be done, which is why next week we'll be voting on a $9.3 billion rescission package where we're taking money back from the government and putting it back to the American people by way of the Treasury.
Okay, well, let's go back to the punching in Congress. I'm curious your thoughts about the importance of setting a precedent, for charging a sitting member of Congress, especially given that I don't see a lot of people on the left calming down. It seems like their potential is for more of these kinds of protests and incidents.
Well, members of Congress, members of the public, we the people, we have a right to peacefully protest. Once you cross that line and it becomes violent, then that's a different conversation. And we've got to respect the rule of law. We've got to respect our law enforcement. Again, you can vehemently disagree with your local PD or state police or ICE or whomever, but you can't attack them. And again, when you see in some of these communities where it's tough to be a police officer, law enforcement recruitment, again, local, state, federal, all across the board, recruitment is down because they get, made the villain, even though they're the good guys and gals keeping us safe every day. And so I think it's important that these charges are levied, even if she gets some sort of probation or whatever. That's well outside my purview and opinion, quite frankly. That being said, I think that the right thing was done here. You cannot assault a member of law enforcement, period. I don't care who you are.
Congressman, thank you so much. On brawls from ICE facilities to the brawls that are going on social media, right. We really appreciate your time today.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with more right after this. If you've seen Daniel Turner on the show, he's a mild-mannered guy who just wants practical energy policies. But no good deed goes unpunished, as Turner faced threats from a House Democrat earlier in his testimony yesterday. He talked about that and much more with Chris Bedford earlier today. Watch.
Joining me now is Daniel Turner, a friend of the show, a star on Capitol Hill, and the executive director and founder of Power the Future, a nonprofit that works on behalf of energy workers and other folks in the industry, and essentially a better American system for the things that make everything in our life work for us. Daniel, thank you for joining us.
Always great to be back. Thanks, Chris.
So I was watching yesterday your witness testimony at the House Oversight Committee's DOJ subcommittee that actually had a special guest. The chairman of the committee himself came down because he was interested, as I am and as our viewers are, in some of the really excellent work that your organization has been doing in regards to the AutoPen. So you remembered, 4 years is so long for the presidency, but something that stuck out to you was Speaker Mike Johnson asking President Biden, why did you ban liquid natural gas exports? And the president saying, I didn't. And that was just chalked up to maybe him being not paying attention, not knowing what he was doing. But now that we know about the AutoPen, and now that we know about the powerful decisions that unelected people from the Obama administration serving in the Biden administration were doing with the executive orders that a president, we now know for a fact, clearly didn't always understand what was going on around him. You went back through a number of the executive orders. So share with our viewers some of the things that you shared with the committee so that we can learn a little bit more about this excellent investigation.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And it is really important because if you have people acting in persona presidente, right? They're acting on behalf of the president. I mean, it's fraud. It's deception. It's impersonation of the president. And that's not how our country could ever function. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to find some of these executive orders and look for any evidence of Biden speaking about it in first person. Talking on Air Force One, talking to the media at an event, right? So he was doing some campaign events and bringing it up. Not everyone makes the grandiose gestures of executive orders that President Trump does, where he holds them up and he's got the audience there. But you would think an executive order as big as I banned the export of liquid natural gas, you would think he would mention it once or twice. And so we found 8 instances where there is absolutely no moment that the president spoke about it in first person. So we conclude the president had no idea these were even done. And we are asking if there's evidence, can you determine whether or not Joe Biden directed these, require them, called for them, was aware of them, or was this just all staff taking leniencies?
So I assume, based on your testimony yesterday on Wednesday, that you're working with Republicans in Congress to try to get to the bottom of this. Have they been responsive? Have they shown the interest in this scandal that
they have,
you
and that's why
expect?
It was great to see Chairman Comer there yesterday and have this exchange, because we're focusing just on energy executive orders and energy and climate ones, and there are only 8. But there are thousands of executive orders that other folks in their interest should be looking at, right? There were lots of executive orders that we have no evidence at all if the president was aware of it. I even did the math. Someone asked me once if we were looking at the pardons, and I said, no, I stay in my wheelhouse, which is energy. But I'll tell you this on pardons. Of the 8,300 or so pardons Joe Biden gave, right, if I had Chris Bedford's file before me and saying he's up for a pardon, how much time would I legitimately need to give to that file to determine if you get a pardon? If I'm going to be really, really cheap and say 2 minutes maximum, well, 2 minutes times 8,000 pardons is a long, long, long time for Joe Biden. It's not humanly possible for Joe Biden to have looked at 8,000 pardons.
Considering how many hours he was up in a day. And now.
Exactly. So you add up the pardons, you add up all the executive orders on energy, you add up a lot of these decisions, and you realize Joe Biden was in Delaware every Friday from noon until Monday. How in the hell did he make any of these decisions? And now you realize he probably did not.
No, he must not have, and that's a great point to make as well. And I know that some reporters now are racing other nonprofits and oversight staff and looking at these different executive orders and which ones outside of the energy wheelhouse made sense. What were some of the most impactful? And most of them are pretty negative, but not all of them. But what were some of the most negatively impactful executive orders the president put out, that these people put out from the White House, and the effect that they had on the American energy independence and the American energy economy and small businesses and workers?
Yeah, the export of natural gas ban was the biggest.
People lost their livelihoods.
It also really contributed to the ongoing war in Russia-Ukraine. When we stopped exporting liquid natural gas, the rest of the world bought Russian gas, but they bought it through intermediaries, whether it was the Turks, whether it was the Egyptians, I believe. A lot of countries just didn't follow the sanctions on Russian oil and gas, and they acted as intermediaries. And so the French and the Italians and the Brits and everyone just bought it through an intermediary. And so here we are saying we have to stop Putin's war, and yet his executive order is funding the war. It also bankrupted many, many small companies and small businesses when you are exporting natural gas for a living, and then tomorrow an executive order comes out and says that's now illegal. The ban on offshore drilling, 500 and something million acres of land taken of shore taken offline, right? The president just signed a blanket. You can no longer look for oil or gas in this area.
And these things are easy to do, but very difficult to undo, right?
Oh, yeah. And that's the problem with energy, and that's why, the best example of that, Chris, that's a great point, egg prices. How come egg prices haven't come down? They're down, but it did take 4 or 5 months, right? The egg prices we were feeling in January is the trickle of Joe Biden's energy policies, punitive policies, which made life expensive starting in 2021. Everything, it caught up to us, and now it's reversing, but it's gonna take some time to get this industry back online.
And that's why prophetic people like you raise their own chickens and get their own eggs.
Keep us away from the government system. It was just infuriating the way that this happened. And I like process crimes. A lot of folks in D.C. like process issues. I often think of the Ray FBI when they said, let's make a list of every Catholic who goes to Latin Mass, right? There's a process. People got in a room, they sent like evites, like, hey, Chris, can you join us at 3 o'clock? We're going to. The processes that I think needs to be investigated. Who are these people? Who made this decision? Well, if you're going to sign AutoPen, this is a process crime, right? That machine is not just sitting there in the lobby for anyone to go up to. You got to get a key. You got to get permission. There are staff secretaries. We know a lot of White House personnel who have these roles. A lot of people have to be signed off. A lot of machinations happen when you're going to put the president's signature on a document. None of those people have the luxury of hiding behind executive privilege, because these are alleged crimes. And just because you work for the president, you don't have the luxury of saying, I'm not going to appear before Congress. Sadly, I'll finish with this. The Biden administration set this precedent as well when they said, now, Peter Navarro, we think you're guilty of a crime. And they took him out of Reagan Airport in shackles, right? He tried to claim executive privilege. They threw Steve Bannon in jail. He tried to claim executive privilege. So the Biden administration has set a lot of evil precedents. But I'm going to use those precedents to go after this, because if the corruption doesn't stop, we are not going to make it as a country.
Yeah, I think that's completely right. I want to play a clip right now of an interesting interaction that you had as this hearing was nearly concluded.
The gentleman goes around, comes around. The gentleman's time has expired. Chairwoman, okay. I now recognize Mr. Jack from Georgia for 5 minutes. I just want to make clear.
Thank you, Madam
what goes
Chair,
around can come around.
Thank you, Madam.
I apologize for the rare point of order. I wasn't able to ask Mr. Kassar before he ran out the room, but he was looking at the witnesses talking about a murderer and said, what goes around comes around. And I don't know what that comment meant. I don't have the luxury of Capitol Hill police to protect me. In the climate space, we get a lot of death threats. We got a lot of hate. The climate environmental groups, the original violence. I just don't know what goes around comes around meant.
Mr. Turner, we'll address you feeling threatened as soon as the hearing is ended. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yep.
Well, that was something else, Daniel. That was wild to see. You seemingly threatened with murder and on the witness stand, and not just like some Long Island Republican telling someone he's going to break him like a girl and throw him over the balcony. This was on camera and everybody knew it.
Yeah.
So what was going on and what was going through your head, and how does this fit in with the kind of violence that you have to experience all the time anyways?
I get a lot of hate mail and death threats because the eco-left are the original political violence, right? You go back to the spiking trees back in the 80s because of the spotted owl, right? The burning down of ski resorts. The eco-left has a long history in political violence. So political violence directed towards me is kind of not new. But it was odd to see it from a member of Congress so flippant. He was talking about this horrible mass murder in his city of San Antonio, and then saying what goes around comes around. And he's doing it in this context of you need to stop punishing nonprofits because otherwise you're going to be mass murdered next. It was so bizarre, and I wasn't going to let it go. I actually got a little, not scolded, but you're not supposed to interrupt hearings, right? They're very formal. But I was like, I'm not going to sit here and have some little congressman, write a check he's not going to cash, right? Like I am not going to be threatened by a member of Congress who's got all this bravado trying to intimidate me. I thought it was really inappropriate, really offensive. He scurried out of the room like a little weasel. I doubt I'll ever hear from him again, but I'm glad I called him out.
Yeah, I'm glad too. That kind of behavior is absolutely atrocious, and the casual references to violence against the right, well, violence against the right is happening all the time. Violence against Americans, violence against Christians, violence against like you mentioned previously, people who work in natural resources is excused and sometimes promoted. And they also try to frame you as someone who is just fighting for big oil, but that's not who Power of the Future fights for. ExxonMobil and these other BP, they have their own people who they work with. The folks they're not going out of business when an LNG export ban comes into place. The little guys seem to be the ones going into business. The kind of guys that you saw in the movie Armageddon, one of America's greatest movies of all time. These are the cowboys out there who are doing the work, trying to bring us the energy. Tell us a little bit about who you represent and also where people can follow and find your work, this important work that you're doing.
Thank you. You can find everything on powerofthefuture.com, or people can email me, daniel@powerofthefuture.com. But yeah, it's those small oil and gas and coal and small independent businesses, small family businesses. You know, the vast majority of our resources come from small, private, family-owned businesses. Upwards of 80% of our oil comes from independents. They don't come from the majors. And so you get this kind of like ugly collaboration, which we've seen a lot in our American history. We saw it the best during COVID, this evil collaboration of big government and big business to shut out little guys, right? You get your waiver to keep your store open, but mom and pop groceries have to close up shop, and then surprise, they go out of business. We see this very, very often, and the oil and gas and the fossil fuel business is absolutely no different. And we fight for those small businesses across rural America who don't always have an advocate and don't always have someone on their side. And so I'm proud of my organization and the work we're doing on their behalf.
Did you get any $2 billion free money grants from the Biden administration to do this important work?
I had one exchange with the congressman where I tried to explain how difficult it is to spend that much money. I mean, it really, really is very difficult to spend ethically. I did throw in the word ethically.
I'll just take a portion of it.
Yeah.
I'll just take a little. I just need a little bit. Well, Daniel Turner with Power of the Future, thank you so much for coming back on the show. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Well, obviously, the big news of the day is the big fight between Donald Trump and Elon Musk. It feels like the parents are fighting. Nobody likes it when your parents are fighting. I don't know. Is Elon Musk like the Yoko Ono of the MAGA movement right now? I have no idea what's going on at this point. But what we do know, MP, is this all basically started 2 days ago, right? We read this Elon tweet on the show a couple days ago when he said, "I'm sorry, I can't stand it anymore. This massive, outrageous pork-filled bill, right? This spending bill is a disgusting abomination." He said, "Shame on you for voting it. You know you did wrong. You know it," right? That whole thing felt a little weird, right? It was like, okay, we understand that Elon Musk is no longer, the special government employee anymore. And is this what it's going to feel like now that Elon's on the outside looking back in, now that he has that freedom to talk? Well, things have since escalated, MP.
Yeah, and remember, that was a few days ago. That was June 3rd. And of course, it is pointed, right? He's saying instead of a big, beautiful bill, it's a disgusting abomination. It's not beautiful. That was remarkable. But you felt like, well, the guy just left. He's, airing his opinions and some of his grievances. So the Trump camp was pretty quiet about this. Carolyn Levitt was asked about it and was pretty polite. But June 5th, 11:20 a.m., Trump started talking about it. He said, I'm very disappointed with Elon. I've helped him a lot. And what Trump said is, look, he knew the inner workings of the bill better than anybody sitting here. He had no problem with it. All of a sudden, he had a problem. And then Trump claimed he only developed the problem when he found out they were going to cut the electric vehicle mandate.
Yeah, and you look at it, and Elon came back at Donald Trump, and he says, "False, this bill was never shown to me even once. It was passed in the dead of night so fast that almost no one in Congress could read it." And so now you have the first back and forth that we've seen directly on X, and that was just a few minutes after Trump posted the first one that MP just read.
Yeah, and that was a video. The first actually written remarks by Trump. It's really, it's 3 days later from when Elon first complained, And what he said was Elon was wearing thin. So I asked him to leave. I took away his EV mandate that forced everyone to buy electric cars that nobody else wanted, that he knew for months I was going to do, and he just went crazy.
Well, and then things really escalated. It's the meme that escalated quickly. Elon came out and said it's such an obvious lie. It's so sad. But then he dropped the Epstein files in, MP.
Yeah. So what Elon says, look, it's a lie that I am against the, taking away the electric vehicle mandate. He obviously doesn't want that. He thinks it's unfair because there's other subsidies for oil and gas, he says. But in the past, he has said, look, it's okay if they get rid of it. I don't think it's an existential crisis for him, but who knows? They're both claiming different things here. But what happens is, after Trump attacks back, something that I would have predicted if I had been there, telling people, gaming this out. He goes in what you might call his autistic meltdown mode, and then he says, drops the really big bomb. That's the Epstein files. This is the real reason they have not been made public, because Trump is in them. Have a nice day, DJT.
Yes, and Elon goes through and says, mark this post for the future. The truth will come out. Well, now the gloves are off at this point in time. And Donald Trump goes, the easiest way to save money in our budget, billions and billions of dollars, you can hear him saying that, is to terminate Elon's government subsidies and contracts. I will always surprise that Joe Biden didn't do it. And you go through and you just say, okay, you know what? Donald Trump's like, I'm going to go directly at Elon Musk, and I'm going to say, right, that the reason that Elon got to be so successful and got to be the richest man in the world is on the back of a lot of the government contracts that he got and the subsidies that he got. So now Donald Trump is like, okay, you know what? If that's how you got there, I'm going to take a direct jab at that.
Well, yeah. 9 minutes later, Musk says, look, I'm going to decommission the Dragon spacecraft immediately. Okay, fine. Like, you guys don't want to go to space. So, I mean, this thing has escalated since, but it really was that back and forth with Trump sort of coming out and getting, I guess, sick of Elon complaining about the big, beautiful bill. I think this is very unfortunate. It's really sad, actually, and I think everyone needs to cool down and cool out and just take a deep breath for a variety of reasons. Okay, first off, there was no way, zero chance that Donald Trump and Elon Musk wouldn't get into it at some point or disagree, and that would spill out into the public. That was always going to happen. And you can say that with 100% certainty because of the personalities involved. But that's okay. That's built into the relationship, right? So if you're sitting there thinking about how, to manage this and how to move people towards the good, that's going to happen, right? And so it does. He complains about the bill. I have right now I have no knowledge confirmed about what is happening inside of all of this. I think it's, who knows what the real debate is here, but he's upset at the bill. My advice at that point would be like, so what? I mean, for some weird reason, I've had to bring together and lead chads and autists of all kinds throughout my life. It feels like that's just what I have to do. And so when you have someone like Elon, you know what he's going to do. You let him go do that. You give him some rope. Let him complain. Let him spurg out. And then a lot of times, someone like that will come back around to the things they're interested in, and they'll still help you out. So that would have been my advice. Doesn't excuse Elon at all, but my advice would have been you just let him go. As soon as Trump went back at him, it was clear he was just going to fly off the handle, and that's to be expected. And maybe Trump had to do that. I don't know. I think the whole thing's stupid. I knew they'd get in debate. I think this is just a really dumb way to do it. And it's it's kind of harmful for the movement.
Yeah, I don't feel like there's going to be any real winner here at this point in time, and it's still going to be remain to actually go through and see how this whole thing ends, because I think that it could still potentially escalate from where we are now. I hope it doesn't, but when you look at it, the two best friends, and two of them very successful alphas, putting them next to each other at some point, well, I don't think the two best friends were going to be best friends forever, but I also didn't think that they were going to have a very public unwind this way. There's other ways of doing this, and Elon could have just kind of like gone off into the shadows a little bit. It's almost like, hey, you're friends. you've spent too much time together, right? Everybody needs to go back to their own houses before. Like, you've just spent too much time together. That's what the parents would be saying. You know what? Come back here. It'll be fine in a week. You'll be happy again.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Look, Elon didn't have to come out against the bill. I don't know what did he think he was going to achieve. Practically speaking, the administration is just trying to get its stuff, funded, the agenda funded. This wasn't the time, I don't think, to really try to cut. I just don't think Congress has it in them. On the other hand, I appreciate Elon wanting to cut more. Like, that's great. That's a good thing. And also, Elon, why did he have to tweet? I don't know. So there's a couple of possibilities here. One is that, one or the other or both decided this is not a good match, and I'm actually going in a very different direction. I'm going to stake my claim and go off into space, right, in a completely different way, where there's a longer term goal that we don't even know about. Two is, retarded stuff happens, and it just escalated, and that's kind of at the other extreme. Three is, in between there were some real disagreements that couldn't be resolved that may or may not be what you see in the headlines. But again, what I would say here is, I don't think that everyone should just say, all right, just punt Elon. He's, it's too bad he didn't support the president, so kick him out. I think that Elon means a little bit more than just being another business leader. I think the tech part of this coalition is real, and both the right-leaning tech or open to right tech and the MAGA movement sort of need each other in order to get things done. And that's why this is unfortunate. So, I say everyone just cool heads prevail. These people can get along in different ways in the future. What we don't want is crazy. Elon's saying, I'm going to start another party that represents 80% of the people. Like, yeah, there's a lot of people who tried that before when they go to the third party. Like, Elon needs to cool out. And, at this point, I think it's really about whether or not he will attack people, right, in Congress. A lot of the people he'd attack in Congress are establishment Republicans. That's why the best way to play this would have been, to leave him alone, let him cool out, and then push him towards, well, we will agree on getting rid of these establishment Republicans who won't cut. That's okay. So what's he going to do now? I don't know. But I think everyone will calm down in the next week, and we'll see how it goes.
Well, I think the shorter, smaller question at this point is what's going to happen in the United States between the Republicans and the Democrats. I mean, are they going to be having these problems on Mars when Elon goes and colonizes it? It's just going to be the Elon Musk party at that point in time. He's going to be able to do whatever he wants, MP.
Well, he says he wants, a form of direct democracy, but we're a long way off from that. And look, Elon's engagement in politics is pretty recent. And this is high stakes stuff, so we'll see how it develops. No reason to get worried about it.
Listen, enjoy it. Grab the popcorn. Watch it play out. We're all going to enjoy it just for a little while. But everybody, cooler heads will prevail in the end. Thanks for watching tonight. We'll see you back here tomorrow.